Hi, Patricia Worby Alchemy Therapies here, and another in my coronavirus diaries, which I haven't done for a few days, just to update what's going on at the moment in the UK, but also to look at what we're doing to kind of get through this and some positive ideas as well. So currently the UK is not recommending masks, although a lot of people are wearing them voluntarily. I'm noticing that in supermarkets particularly. But the UK government, I should say the English government actually, because Scotland have disagreed and advised wearing them. And the reason is that a lot of people who get COVID-19, or I should say actually the virus itself, SARS-CoV-2, are asymptomatic. So in other words, they don't show any symptoms. And so what the mask is for really, and I have one here, handy mask, is to actually prevent an asymptomatic person from spreading the virus to other people unwittingly. And this is what's been happening, unfortunately, in care homes. We have one of the worst rates of infection, I think, in Europe now, mainly in care homes. The infection rate is going down generally, and hospital admissions are going down, and cases are stabilising. But cases and deaths are rising hugely in care homes, and it seems like we made a major mistake early on not sealing off care homes. Some people did, but it was not mandated by the government, and also releasing people from hospital without them being tested, and so bringing in the virus to the care home, where of course it rapidly spreads because people are in close proximity, being tended by the same people who, when you are doing care work, you cannot maintain social distance. It's just impossible. So we do have a real problem with that. And lack of PPE has been a continuing issue. Lack of testing, although that is changing gradually. We're getting more testing now. I think we're up to about 50,000 a day, although it's supposed to be 100,000. The target has been missed. We also have several things that have happened to make a bit of a vacuum in the government. So we had our Prime Minister go down quite seriously and be admitted to hospital. He's also now just become a father. So luckily for him, I think, that he's made it, because it would have been a tragedy had he died and missed the birth of his son. So we are grateful for that positive news, but it does mean that at the centre of government, where we need leadership, we are at the moment lacking a little bit. And we've had a very disorganised, I believe, response from our government compared to other countries. I know they're doing their best, and it's an unknown event. But so anyway, with regard to what one can do positively, I don't think it's enough to wait for the vaccine. The vaccine is a long way off. Early reports at the moment are suggesting we might have it by the end of the year, but that's at the most hopeful outcome. More likely it would be early next year, so we can't wait for that. Antibody testing, well, that has been first of all promoted and then backtracked from, as it's unfortunately not as reliable as we hoped. Now, the problem with testing someone for antibodies is not everybody produces antibodies, it seems, because of course, if you understand the immune system, if your immune system is functioning really, really well, the antibody producing part of your system, which is your second line defense, not your first line defense, it's part of the adaptive system, might not come into play. Because if your gut is really healthy, and your innate system, which is largely based in the mucous membranes of your nose, tonsils, adenoids, and all the areas of epithelium in your body, that can destroy the virus before it gets into the cell. And if that happens, then you're unlikely to form antibodies. So it's a good sign if you don't form antibodies in a way, although then there is a question mark, would you be infected again? Yes, quite likely. But always the body will respond in the same way. If it's healthy, it should destroy the virus quite quickly. If your gut is compromised in some way and or like me, you don't have tonsils or adenoids because they were removed when I was a child. That's another story. Tonsillectomy is usually given to children who have constant infections in them, which was my case because I was allergic to dairy and didn't know. And of course, being my age group, was fed milk all the time as a health food. So created a great deal of mucus and infection in my system. So I don't have a first line defense in my tonsils or adenoids. I don't have that. And so I am more likely to get viral or bacterial infection further down in my respiratory system. So that does in fact happen sometimes. If I get a very bad cold or flu, it does tend to go to my chest. So we have to do things to help keep us healthy. And the reason why flu comes around more often and viral infections generally in the winter months is because of vitamin D. We're often very, very low in that. And even being pale skinned like me, and therefore more efficient at producing vitamin D generally when in sunshine than say a darker skinned person, because we don't have the right wavelength in the UK between October and April. We simply don't have, we're at the wrong latitude, we're too far north. The same occurs far south as well. So in New Zealand, there'd be the same problem, for instance, in parts of South America. You basically don't manufacture enough vitamin D, and your body stores begin to wind down. They're at their lowest, in fact, in sort of February, March, which of course is absolutely the time when this virus really hit our shores and started to replicate uncontrollably. Now, there's been a lot of information about replication, and I just wanted to introduce, I haven't mentioned it before, but the R0 value, which is the number of people that one person can infect. And this is absolutely crucial in kind of controlling the virus. We need to keep it down below 1, because if you infect more than one person, they infect more than one person, and so on and so on and so on, you can see that that's an exponential going up and up and up. If we keep it less than 1, it starts to tail off, which is what all the approaches have in common through the various countries, keeping it below 1, so that if there is a second peak and R0 creeps up again, we would impose more stringent social distancing or reintroduce the lockdown, bring it back down again, and so on. That's what the peak is. And it's a very important idea. It's not the only way we could approach this. We could go the way of Sweden, which is deciding not to lock down, but to sort of try and encourage people to maintain sensible precautions whilst protecting the elderly and keeping their care homes absolutely sealed, which is the way they're doing it. They're one of the few countries that are doing that. I think Brazil may be the only country that I know of at the moment that is also following that sort of, well, actually their approach is who cares, actually. It's a terrible state of affairs there. And it's being allowed to just go through the population. So I think we're learning a lot. The other thing to notice is that in the UK we have 2 other approaches which are coming in, and one is an app, contact tracing app, which we're told is coming in 2 to 3 weeks, which will allow a mobile phone to pick up people that you're in contact with, and if you are infected, it will track and trace those, or will alert the government that they need to be tracked and tested. The other app that's currently out there at the moment, it's actually operational at the moment, has been developed at King's College, and it's an app called Zoe, Z-O-E, and you can just Google that and find it, download it. It's actually tracking manually. You enter the data manually into your phone, whether you're feeling well or not. If you're not, what your symptoms are, whether you've been tested or not. And I've actually been entering data into that for the last probably about 3 to 4 weeks. And if you go onto their website, you'll see there's a huge amount of data coming out from that. And okay, it's only probably nearly 3 million people, but it's still a very large cohort, as we call it, in technical terms, a number of people that are taking part in a study as a cohort. So we're picking up, for instance, that asthma, which was formerly thought to be a risk factor, is not so much a risk factor. Obesity is one of the biggest risk factors for severe disease, as is diabetes. Heart disease, I think, is number 1, and possibly certain other lung conditions, but it's been very interesting that asthma doesn't seem to predispose you to worse symptoms. So there is a lot more information and a lot more data coming out here, and therefore we're getting more idea of how to control. But I would say to you, don't just wait around passively. You know, eat well, look after yourselves, exercise in sunlight, take your vitamin C every day. Don't believe the hype that that has no difference. If we understood vitamins properly, we would use them as a first line intervention, but it's because medical science doesn't get trained in this. And basically big pharma doesn't want to know because it's not patentable. When you understand that that's what drives medical research and medical education, you'll get an idea why vitamins and minerals are not talked about as a prevention. They will tell you there is no evidence. Well, they're probably right to some extent. There is no randomized controlled trial evidence because it's impossible to do those kinds of trials, because you need to get ethical approval, and how are you going to deny somebody a treatment that might possibly work? You would find that very difficult. And plus there's no money to fund these trials because there's no potential profit at the end of them. You cannot patent natural products. That's why in drug development, you have to change natural products very subtly to make a drug, and then test them with an RCT, a randomized controlled trial. And then you can say, oh, this works or this doesn't work. That's happening at the moment with various antivirals. But you know, the best antiviral out there is vitamin C. And I'm not going to stop saying that just because I can't prove it with RCT data. There are plenty of studies that show retrospectively that people with higher vitamin C and vitamin D levels have less severe disease. So, and I will try and find some and post under this video, because I don't want you to think I'm not scientifically guided. I am, but the science has been manipulated. It has been taken over to promote profit. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just follow the money. I used to work in pharma, so I understand how it works. I used to be in research and I understand how that works. So I'm not coming from an anti-vax position or an anti-pharmaceuticals. They sometimes have great effects and are very important, but they shouldn't be our only arm, and they shouldn't be our first arm. Our first arm should be food, nutrition, stress relief, getting people back into connection with their lives and themselves and doing things that heal and give them joy. And then we should look at symptom suppression if those first line approaches are not working. So anyway, those are my thoughts for today. Hope you've enjoyed listening, and do subscribe. Bye for now.